Greetings, imagination connoisseurs. Once again, it is I, your Duke of Dope Discourse, your Viceroy of Verisimilitude, your Master of Fun and Wonder, your existential Mr. Rogers, Mr. Robert Meyer Burnett, coming at you from the Robservatory, Robcasting, with Robservations episode number 318, to you members of this, the Post-Geek Singularity community, you imagination connoisseurs who make it all possible. Welcome to today's show. I wonder, do I have anything else to talk about today? Well, ladies and gentlemen, first of all, let me just say, somebody left me a comment on yesterday's chat that said, oh, Robservations and you Robcast from the Robservatory. Are you full of yourself or something? Well, sure, why not? But I also have to, have a good time. It's all fun. It's like catchphrases, and we're trying to build a community by having fun things to do. That's why I call you all imagination connoisseurs, which, by the way, that was something I came up with on my own. I think that's a pretty good phrase, to be honest. Who doesn't want to be an imagination connoisseur? Who doesn't want to be a connoisseur of anything? But what better thing to be a connoisseur of than flights of fancy? Those things that are created by the imagination. And I say, if you're not having a good time here at the Robservatory watching Robservations as I Robcast to you members of this, the Post-Geek Singularity community, well then, you've come to the wrong place. Anyway, the first thing I want to say off the top is many of you know that my most recent work, which you're going to be able to see next week on the 23rd of January, is a short science fiction film that I edited that was actually written and directed by Lucas Kendall, formerly of Film Score Monthly, and of course one of the men who has produced probably the greatest array of soundtrack albums ever. He directed this short, which is a proof of concept for a feature film that he is in the process of casting right now. Offers are out to actors, but I figured I'll throw you out the trailer. This, of course, drops on the Dust Network next Thursday, the 23rd. So it'll be on the Dust Roku channel, and it will be on the Dust YouTube channel. This is, of course, Skyfighter.
We were attacked by an enemy probe. Do you remember anything?
No. Who the hell are you?
Your co-pilot.
She's compromised. She hacked you.
You altered the readout.
It was your idea.
She's a danger to you, to us, the whole fleet.
You've broken free before. You can do it again.
So, that's always cool to have work coming out. You've heard me talk a lot about Tango Shalom, the feature film that I've been working on, but I also do other things, and I think that Skyfighter is a very cool, it's a 15-minute short, sort of a proof of concept for a feature. It was actually based on a feature film that Lucas wrote that he wants to direct. It's very, very cool, actually. I really like the feature script a lot, but he wanted to direct it, and since he hadn't directed anything before, the financiers said, well, okay, why don't you show us what you got? So he directed that. It's sort of a reimagining of the feature done in 15 minutes. So check that out on the Dust Network next week. Uh-oh, look who's here, ladies and gentlemen. I start talking, and there's no way around it. For those of you new to the show, Gilbert and Tallulah are part of that show, and they have now trained me well to the point where I start talking. Why don't we come up here? There you go, Gilly. And I don't have your cookies today. I have treats. You want another one? Okay, there's these. These are fiend for these new treats. Tallulah gets one, and you don't get another, Gilly. You had two. That's all you get. You just get two, and Tallulah gets two. Good boy, buddy. Good boy. You get down. Yes, you do. Here, buddy. Okay? Get down. Good boy. You're a good boy. Yes. So, ladies and gentlemen, for those who have not watched the show before, that is Gilbert and then his sister Tallulah. Gilbert is a Bernedoodle. He's 25% Bernese Mountain Dog, 75% Poodle. And his sister Tallulah is an Irish Doodle, 50% Irish Setter, and 50% Doodle. So there you go. Now, boys and girls, it's time for you to go. I got to talk. So yesterday, many of you know that I shared with you the December 2016 draft. Oh, Tallulah, what? This isn't enough for you? The December 16th draft of Derek Connolly and Colin Trevorrow's unmade Episode 9 script, the Duel of the Fates. And gosh, I knew people would be interested, but boy, I guess I underestimated just how interested. It's funny. I honestly, I think I underestimated the interest because I'm so used to. There's so many movies that don't get made, and of course, I do the Inglorious Trexperts podcast as part of Dean Devlin's Electric Surge Network, and there's a great podcast there called The Best Movies Never Made, and they cover all kinds of movies that haven't been made, and they interview a lot of the principals that were involved in those movies that never happened. Things like Joe Dante's The Jetsons. And there are many, 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 many scripts. There's a lot more scripts that get written and developed at studios than even get made. And to me, finding scripts that don't get made is I just find it interesting, and I've been collecting these things for a long time. Now, a lot of people ask me about or have questioned the veracity, like, oh, if this script is this alleged script. Well, let me tell you, what I tried to do was set up my bona fides yesterday about my ability to judge a script. And I can assure you that the way this script is written, I believe it to be, in my heart, 100% genuine. Nobody could write a fake script this well. And I know that because I read screenplays for a living for many years. And let me tell you, 99% of them were not good. This was a very good, very well-written script. And I thought, since I had covered it yesterday and I've been receiving unbelievable amounts of questions. First of all, once again, let me reiterate. I don't have a script to give to you, and even if I did, I would not give it to you. It is not mine to distribute. I can talk about it, certainly, but I don't have anything that I can provide to anybody, and it's not my place to provide it. But talking about it and reporting on it is something that I can absolutely do. But I'm not going to be. People talk about it being a leak. I wouldn't say this was a leak. I would say this was a script that was written, that was finished in December, mere days, by the way, I would like to point out, before Carrie Fisher passed away. So I would suspect that because she plays such a large role in this script, that might have been a factor on why Colin Trevorrow ultimately left the project. But I stand by my assertion. I really enjoyed this script, and I wanted to go into more detail. I didn't do a very good job of synopsizing the end of the script, the back end of the script. So I wanted to clarify some things in the script, and I figured I would go into a little bit more detail and talk more at length. And I'm sure I have heard from a number of people that this script is out there, that people have it, which doesn't surprise me, because look, I had to obtain my knowledge somewhere, and I'm sure. Like I've often explained that for those people who work in Hollywood, that work in the entertainment industry, I stole this from author Andrew Vaux, writer of the great Burke novels. If you haven't read Andrew Vaux and you haven't read the Burke novels, they're great. The first book is called Flood. I highly recommend it. It's about a great character, obviously, named Burke. And he talks a lot about, he has a group of informants, of operatives, and they create what's called the whisper stream. It's kind of like where rumors and innuendo and information is spread. Well, Hollywood has a whisper stream. And agents, managers, people that work at studios, it's all sort of interconnected. And when something is of interest, whether it's a script or mostly scripts or information like that, it gets shared. Nothing is totally secret. Now, when you're working on a movie, when you've actually been hired, nobody really shares that information because they don't want to lose their jobs. They're usually covered under NDAs or things like that. But remember, this script that I'm talking about was not made. Colin Trevorrow and Derek Connolly, his writing partner, do receive story credit on the Rise of Skywalker script. And after reading this document, or perhaps I had it, I don't know, told to me. But it's very apparent that most of where Rise of Skywalker originated was in their script. Now, I want to point out, Emperor Palpatine only appears in the Duel of the Fates script as a hologram that was being projected out of the Sith holocron, the Sith holocron that it was Kylo Ren was watching this in the remnants of Darth Vader's castle on Mustafar, and once the holocron realized it wasn't Vader, because the Emperor was addressing Vader, it shocked Kylo Ren and ravaged his face with Sith energies. And that was it. That's all you saw. But Palpatine was at least his hologram, so it's not a big leap. But what I really wanted to talk about was, and I'm gonna give you a further look, a much more in-depth look, I think, at the script than I did before. And I wanted to, in the beginning of the Rise of Skywalker script, we see Kylo Ren, or in the film, we see him land on Exegol and talk to Palpatine. Well, in this script, and this happens, by the way, on this draft, on the draft of the script, it happens on page 45, where the Emperor Palpatine's hologram has said to Vader, if you aren't able to turn Luke Skywalker, bring him to the planet of Remnicor and introduce him to Tor Valum. Now, a lot of people are like, what is this? Is he a Sith Lord? You know, what's going on with this character? And Tor Valum is somebody that was a teacher of Palpatine's. So, what happens is, when Kylo Ren, on page 45 of this draft of the script, lands on Remnicor, he makes it to Remnicor. And it's very similar to what happens on Exegol. The feeling is there. Kylo approaches an ancient stone military battlement consumed by time. Skeletons of fallen war beasts litter the terrain. Whatever battle happened here, it ended centuries ago. He passes empty suits of armor, robes draped over broken shields, flags flutter in the wind. A Sith helmet on the ground, skull visible within, a reminder that while the Jedi live on, the Sith become dust, which I thought was very interesting. His tracking beacon flashes a single red dot. He detects a life form. So he goes into a fortress. There is a fortress on Remnicor. He goes into that fortress. He enters a chamber with broken spaceship parts and technology and piles of ore. And he hears a voice that whispers to him. And the voice says, reveal yourself. And it is, in fact, Tor Velum. And Kylo ignites his lightsaber. And Kylo says, and this is important from what people are saying, Kylo says, I seek the Sith Master Tor Velum. Tor Velum answers, I am no master. And the way it's described, Mountain of Junk moves. From it, as if disguised from within, comes Tor Valum, the 7,000-year-old ancient alien of unknown origin, spindly intense, sinew and muscle pulled tight. And then he says, but I was once called Tor Velum. And Kylo says, you trained Darth Plagueis? And Tor Velum says, that means nothing. That name means nothing to me. And then, of course, Kylo flashes his lightsaber in anger, and Kylo says, does your life? And Tor Velum says, you threaten me with death, how amusing. Kylo says, you are weak, I feel nothing. Tor Velum says, you feel what I allow you to feel, child. And they have a conversation, and Tor Velum Kylo has removed his mask, and it shows his damaged face. His face is veined, corrupted, worse than we remember. Tor Velum appears oddly entertained. Tor Velum says, oh, you wish to obtain the power of those who came before. Take your place among the gods of Mortis. Kylo says, I do. Tor Velum says, so you can rule the galaxy without armies, without spaceships. Kylo says, yes. And Tor Velum says, yet you fear the frailty of your vessel. You, meaning, I think him, meaning his vessel of flesh. You need this power. Tor Velum tasks Kylo to kneel before him. Tor Velum says, you call yourself a Sith, but the Sith are unrepentant, remorseless. You're haunted by the past. your very existence. Kylo says, I have no regrets. Tor Vellum says, you lie. Until you sever yourself from the past, your fate will be the same as theirs. Tor Vellum motions to the battlefield in the valley below. Empty Jedi Knight armor, vacant Sith Marauder armor beside it, withered husks of animals and men. Tor Vellum says, the living force is nourishment. The more one consumes, the stronger one becomes. To take life is to cheat death. And then Kylo says, teach me. And that's where it sort of begins. And what happens is, like I was saying yesterday, Tor Vellum is training Kylo Ren, but they do things. He shows him how to literally consume life, very vampire-esque, being able to take the living force. Because if the force surrounds us and binds the universe together and it's created by all living things, that means everything is burning with the force. And what Tor Vellum teaches Kylo Ren how to do is to remove the living force from living beings. So it's very, very, it's really interesting. I mean, I thought this was like, again, I mean, maybe this delves into the EU more, things like that have been touched on, but I really like this idea. There's a lot of stuff in Clone Wars that deals with this kind of thing, and I really liked all of this stuff. And this Tor Vellum character, I mean, in a way, he's kind of the anti-Yoda, and I really, really enjoyed that. And now, as you know, one of the things I also didn't get into very much was on Coruscant, where a lot of the action takes place, where where Finn and Rose Tico and R2 and 3PO are. They found all kinds of people downtrodden. I mean, to go and use Return of the Jedi as sort of how the script was working, the people of Coruscant, once a bright, vibrant center of trade to the galaxy, are now the poor en masse, and they have nothing, and they've been cut off from civilization. So you basically have a population. They're not Ewoks, but they have been reduced to almost homelessness, poverty. I mean, definitely there was something analogous there, and Finn just can't believe how many people are living underground. And Rose says, rich folks don't spend much time thinking about who and what they're standing on. And it's very funny. There's the R2 and 3PO material in this script is gold, literally gold. And as they're going into the bowels of the city, C-3PO says, I'm afraid all my knowledge of Coruscant is limited to the upper levels. And R2, of course, beeps at him. And C-3PO says, elitist? Where do you even learn that word? Which I thought was very funny. There's a lot of this kind of thing. And there's a great scene where, again, I talked about this yesterday. I really thought that what they did in this script with Rose and Finn, extrapolating upon, I know everybody complains about the Canto Bight sequence, and I too have complained about that, where it comes in Last Jedi. It's like, why are you in the middle of all of this? You're going to leave and have a side mission, a side story? I always thought that was a mistake. But what I had said was, what if you had opened Last Jedi when Rose Tico and Finn are on a mission? I always loved mid-mission, and this script begins that way. I'm not saying that, I mean, this was 2016. I'm not saying I had anything to do with that. But what's really great about this script is, and people are like, I don't like Rose. They do a fantastic job in this script of developing the Rose-Finn relationship. And because you see them on missions, they're doing stuff together. And obviously Rose knows she's a person of the people. We saw that on Canto Bight. And Finn, of course, having left because he was conscripted by the First Order, and he left being a stormtrooper, all of that comes into play in all this. And it really resonates. I mean, it means something. It means something larger, and it plays into the whole idea of a rebellion and what does it mean to want political reform. And it really gets into the nitty-gritty of all these people of Coruscant. And I love the fact that Coruscant being the center of really the Republic, and seeing it so turned upside down. And it's very funny. And when they're going to the Jedi Temple, they have to send R2 and 3PO into the Jedi Temple as Rose and Finn are going to turn on. The plan is they have to turn this beacon on, and it's very cool. R2 is going to project a hologram of Leia to be projected across the 50 planets that are going to receive this beacon. So it's once again Princess Leia saying, help us, you're our only hope. But instead of just to Obi-Wan Kenobi, it's to the galaxy. And there's all kinds of those things in this script, which, I mean, it's really clever how they do callbacks to other things in the Star Wars canon of the movies, but make it their own. It's not just a copy. It's sort of it's just a callback, but it's rejiggered and done and made differently. I think it's so funny there when R2 and 3PO are going into the Jedi Temple. It's obviously ravaged, and there's people living outside and inside of it, and the script it says that it's a sad reminder of a better time, and 3PO says, this doesn't look like the Jedi Temple to me. And they move past oil drum fires and looks from people, strange looks over their shoulders. And of course, R2 is beeping. And C-3PO says, what do you mean I stand out? R2 beeps more. Gold is not ostentatious. Leave the vocabulary to me, you glorified mechanic. I mean, there's all of that kind of thing. And it's very funny. And the R2 3PO stuff in here, it's some of the best R2 and 3PO stuff that it's great. And it's all of this is it's very interesting, and it just adds layers of meaning. And the thing is, it makes the movie, it takes it outside of just being a Star Wars film, and it gives it relevance to today. Not that, and it's not making overtly political commentary. It's not like I'm saying, oh, this is, let's talk about the homeless problem. But no, it's about a downtrodden population that has been subjugated by the First Order, which is a universal idea in time of war. I mean, we all understand what that means. We've all seen movies about occupied France, and it just harks back to all of that. And it's really, really, really well done. And then once they do that, it cuts back to Remnicor, and there's a creature called a Gronk boar, a three-tusk Gronk boar. And we see Kylo Ren stealing, like literally taking out the living force from these creatures. I mean, he's literally using animals to learn how to suck the living force out, which I think I like that idea. And I like that Tor Valum and he's become vampiristic. And I like that. I think that kind of element. I mean, certainly when we saw the Palpatine at the beginning of Force Awakens, with the beginning of The Rise of Skywalker, they make him look like a specter, the way the light shining across his face. It's almost black and white. There's a lot of that in this script. And what's really interesting is that Kylo Ren wants more. You know, it's almost like in an Interview with a Vampire, I want some more. And as Tor Valum is telling him all of this and showing him these things, they see a cave, and Tor Valum, Kylo senses there's something in this cave, and what is it? Tor Valum calls it a vergence in the Force. There is more within. And Kylo, of course, that's when he puts on his mask, and he ends up confronting Darth Vader. And it's really interesting. And then after he loses in the cave, the vision of Vader bests him, and he comes out of the cave, and he's disheveled, and he's disoriented, and he's angry, and Kylo wants to know where Mortis is, and Mortis is where the living force is supposed to have come from. That's, I guess, the origins of it. And Tor Valum says the well of the living force, the source of the galaxy's birth. And Kylo says, I want to be stronger than those who came before me. And, where is it? Where can I find it? And Tor Valum says, you're not worthy yet. And it's very interesting. And then Kylo starts using his force powers against Tor Valum and wants the power. And Tor Valum says, release me. And Tor Valum calls him a betrayer. And what ends up happening is Kylo Ren kills Torvellum, uses that power. So Torvellum is not a Sith Lord. He says, I'm not a Sith. He's more of a teacher. And so Kylo Ren kills Torvellum and takes his energy, or however you want to deal with it. And I thought all of that was really interesting. I mean, it doesn't last very long. Like I could have seen a lot more with their interlude, but the scenes work, and you're jumping between where Rey and Poe are, and where Rose and Finn are. So you're jumping from Poe and Rey to Rose and Finn to Kylo, and you've got these three separate stories. And then when they're on the planet, and then of course you also jump to Leia, and it's really interesting. And what was really great was they finally turn on this message, and when C-3PO and R2-D2 get underneath the Jedi Temple and they turn on the communications device, it really is written like when the flames of Gondor alert Rohan, and you see that great moment where the fires burn. Well, what the script does is it jumps between different places in the galaxy, and it shows different places that are receiving this signal, where presumably they even mention, for those of you who are Star Wars fans, they mention the Bendu monks, and there's different places, but you see Leia, and you see her hologram speaking at all of these different planets, and it's really cool. I mean, it's a really cool scene. But my favorite of the scenes, and it sets up what Lando Calrissian does. It sets up Trandosha Palace night, Bosk sitting like a sultan in his den of pleasures, turns angrily toward the hologram projected from his servant droid. So this message is getting out through droids. It's getting out all over the place. And Leia talks about our voices will not be silenced. Bosk looks out the window at the light connecting to a red rock spire in the distance, and he clenches his fist because I'm sure he has no love for the First Order either. And what's really interesting is one of the last places you see it is it cuts to Tatooine, and it shows a boy and his sister at the base of a moisture evaporator watching their R6 unit play a hologram. So you go back to Tatooine, and Leia, the hologram, is saying at this point, Leia says, "We can no longer live in the shadow of the First Order. We must step into the light." And I think that's really great. And it's really, really cool. And it goes from there. And I just thought all of this, the way all of this is, and by the way, you're in the middle of the script. You're not even at the halfway point of the script yet where all of this is going on. And I think that it was really great. And I really, really liked all of that. And then as you get involved with Rose and Finn discovering more and more about what the underbelly of Coruscant is, and finding the ex-stormtroopers, and Finn even meets a character that he knew from his training days. And again, all of that stuff is great. And then another thing that the script does really well is it fleshes out the Knights of Ren. And the Knights of Ren have been tracking, like we saw in Rise of Skywalker, have been tracking Poe and Finn and Chewie in the Millennium Falcon. And there's a great scene on Bonadan where the Knights of Ren have spotted them, and they end up there's a chase with a sailing ship, and it's really like literally on the water, and they're on the water in like this space catamaran or whatever, and the Knights of Ren are attacking them from the air. And again, it harks back to what we saw in Rise of Skywalker, but Bonadan is a much different environment. You see the water, and I'm sure that's where they got the idea of the ocean, and with the remnants of the Death Star. But in this, we get to see something different, and there's a bow cannon on this thing, and it's great. Bonadan Bay sunset. Poe and Rey speed across the bay toward the landing array. The boat is very fast. Something fires from above, exploding the water all around. And that's the Knife 9. That's what it's called in the script. That's the Knights of Ren ship. Poe says, get to the bow cannon, I'll drive. And then, of course, you have all the Knights of Ren are all named. Hataska Ren. I don't know if I haven't looked at the visual dictionary for Rise of Skywalker yet, so I don't know. But they call this ship that they're on a razor sail, which I think is really, really cool. And so there's Chewbacca, and they're trying to get to Chewbacca, and it's really interesting. And then, of course, when they get there's a huge battle at the end with all of the Knights of Ren, and Rey fights them all, and it's great. I mean, it's really, really, really cool. So there's you just see more environments. The Knights of Ren are far more fleshed out, and it's really interesting. And what I really liked, and I didn't say this was my favorite scene. I was talking about this last night on Midnight's Edge, but Rey is having visions, and as she's fighting the Knights of Ren, she kills them. and it's not good. She's very upset about this. She's very conflicted. And Rey says, she's like, I had no choice. And Poe says, that's okay. Jedi do that, right? And Rey knows, she's seen the Knights of Ren before. She knows who they are, but even though she hasn't met them, and it's very interesting. Rey says, this is when Rey says to Poe, you can't go where I'm going. Like, you can't go. And Poe says, what are you talking about? This is the plan. And Rey says the Resistance needs him. And Poe's like, you have to get on the ship, Rey. You have to come with me right now. And Rey says, you have to leave this place. And Poe says, I'm not leaving you. And keep in mind, this script plays up the romantic tension. Poe has a thing for Rey in this script. And he's constantly trying to be like, hey, don't you think you and I? And she's like, now is not the time. Now is not the time. And I think this is one of the great scenes in the script, where Rey is saying, she says, you'll leave this place and go back to the Resistance. And Poe's like, no, I'm not going to go. And then she's like, you will leave this place and go help the Resistance. And she's trying to use Ben Kenobi's The Jedi mind trick. And Poe resists. Poe knows, he's obviously seen her do this before elsewhere. And he resists, and it goes back and forth. And Chewbacca's howling, and Rey is getting more and more into his mind. And he's resisting her. He's resisting the mind trick because he knows what she's doing. And she finally is like, you will leave this place and go back to the Resistance. And when he's struggling the most, she kisses him. That's when Rey kisses Poe, and that's when his resistance falls. And he says, I have to leave this place and go help the Resistance. And it's a great moment. I mean, it's funny. It harks back to original Star Wars. We get the whole idea of using the Jedi mind trick, and it's really interesting. And then, of course, Rey takes off, and she takes the Knights of Ren's ship. And then Poe and BB-8 and Chewie leave on the Falcon, and they go back to the stolen Eclipse Star Destroyer to join the Resistance again. And it's very interesting. So Hux and Kylo Ren have a conversation that and also, as I've told you, in the middle of the broadcast, it was cut off by the First Order. The First Order was able to cut off the broadcast from the Jedi Temple. And Chancellor Hux contacts Kylo Ren, and after he's leaving Remnicor's orbit, Kylo Ren is in space, and Chancellor Hux contacts Kylo Ren, and Hux says the Resistance tried to overcome the blockade, and Kylo says, do you really not know who stopped them? And it was obviously Kylo did it from afar. And Chancellor Hux says, such treachery cannot stand. We must respond swiftly. And Kylo says, our empire is strong. Show them. And Hux says, your absence emboldens them. If you've acquired the power you seek, show it. Kylo says, Snoke was right about you, Hux. Without faith, you serve only yourself. And then Kylo shuts off transmissions and blasts off into light speed on his way to Mortis. And it's pretty interesting, and that's where the battle starts to begin, and all of that goes on. And it's really, really interesting stuff. And then, of course, Finn and Rose meet more of the Resistance, and he finds, more of his compatriots. And what I really liked about all of this is the script really has resonance. It's not just, it becomes more than you're just watching a Star Wars movie and all this plot happens. There's something really interesting going on that's meaningful, that plays into the whole idea of what Star Wars is, the same way that the prequel trilogy talked about how, it wasn't done very effectively, but talking about this is how democracy will end. There is a lot of that. This script, even though it is, I think, a terrific Star Wars script, it's also a script that has resonance and meaning beyond just like, when you saw Star Wars for the first time and you see the twin setting suns of Tatooine and the score, John Williams' French horn, that mournful theme is playing with that French horn. Everyone's been there. You might never been in space or been to Tatooine. You're not Luke Skywalker, but you certainly know what it's like to watch the sunset and think about, what am I going to do now? And everybody understands that. And there's a lot of that in this script. And it's all of these scenes are coming out of, it's all character. The whole script is character interplay. Now, I will say this. Whatever I've been told that a lot of people that this script is out in the wild. None of that came from me. I have not given a script to anybody. I don't have a script. There was nothing for me to give. But it's interesting that I'm getting all kinds of communications, I guess, because I thought when I read this script that it would be on Reddit already. It was surprising to me that it wasn't. But I didn't really know that. I thought, well, I wasn't even, by the way, looking for this script. It sort of found me. And I certainly wasn't looking for it. And another thing I really loved in the script, and I know this was after Carrie Fisher passed away, they could not have they couldn't have done this. But there's a planet that Leia goes to, the planet Oliphorn. I guess it's Oliphorn. There's a cabaret club. Classy, smoke-filled lampshades on the tables, no customers left, only alien servers cleaning up and cashing out. A slovenly band manager divides up credits between a pair of quad-armed XEXTOS Zextos at the two pianos on stage. And of course, this is Lando Calrissian's club. And you see it says that Leia's shadow falls over the pile of credits. I imagine it was like when Indiana Jones would have showed up to see Marion Ravenwood. I kind of felt like it was going to be like that. Like they're cleaning up the bar and you see the shadow of Indiana Jones. Hello, Marion. And Leia says, a man in his element. I'm sure when they were writing this script, it just felt like this whole thing feels like it's the scene from Raiders when you go see Marion and Lando looks up and sees Leia. And it's very funny. It says Lando jumps to his feet quickly and he brings her hand to his lips and he's going to kiss her hand. And Leia's like, all right. I mean, it's very, you can see the whole thing play out. And Lando's like, you shouldn't be here. And Leia's like, for your sake or mine. And Lando's like, both. But it was a great scene. And Lando explains that his clientele are mostly First Order, but what can he do? It just harks back to where he was at Bespin. And Leia says to Lando, I need your help. Please help me out. We need ships, pilots, smugglers. That's the big thing, is Leia's like, smugglers. So, and Lando says, look, I promised Han I would take care of you if something happened. And Leia's like, you'd take care of me? It's a great scene. And Lando's like, I know, you deserve better, but helping your new friends crash into the First Order's machine isn't what he would have wanted. And Leia's trying to appeal to him and say, look, the galaxy needs you. And Lando's like, remind me never to make promises. And they go down into a docking bay and takes her back to her shuttle. And Lando's like, you need to go. I can't protect you. And she's like, come with me, fight with us. And Lando's like, no, we won a war once already. And what good did that do? And it was interesting to hear Lando referring to the fact that, yeah, we won the war, but the First Order came back. I mean, nobody ever really talks about that in this new trilogy. And Lando says he would do anything for her, and he kisses her on the forehead and then apologizes. And he's not going to help. which is great because it kind of sets up. It's like when Han Solo doesn't come to the aid of well, he says he's not going to come to the aid at the end of the original Star Wars, and it's really interesting. And there's a lot of great stuff. When Rey is also going to Mortis, they've extracted the information from her mind, and it's very interesting that she flashes back and there's no stars visible around this planet. It's only deep black, and this is Mortis, and the power drops out when she tries to land, and her ship it crashes, and the Kylo Ren arrives on Mortis right when she's there. And if you go and you look, well, actually, before I go on, because this is really interesting, I was going to address anybody's questions. So, yeah, people have been sending me super chats or tips. If you want to know specific things, I'm happy to address those directly. And Nick Garula says, hi, Rob. This morning I was driving to work while I listened to you talk about the Duel of the Fates. I was completely blown away with the story. I was picturing all of this going on, and it truly made for a great story. Why do you think they decided not to use it? Well, look, remember, this draft that I have, or maybe read, or maybe just was told to me, this draft was finished literally days before Carrie Fisher passed away. And a lot of this draft Carrie Fisher played a large part in this script throughout. I mean, she was even though you're going from Coruscant, she was also traveling around, like she went to see Lando. So there's a lot of galaxy hopping in this script, and she was a big part of it. And I am sure when Carrie Fisher passed away, that there was, God only knows, can you imagine what that was like, for knowing that, you know, The Last Jedi hadn't come out yet, and to know that Carrie Fisher had passed away, and how that was going to affect the plans. I mean, what was interesting, knowing that this script was done at the end of 2016, obviously there was planning. We talk about how the fact that the prequel trilogy, or pardon me, the sequel trilogy was not well planned, but clearly, I mean, this script was finished, and it's in pretty great shape. Way before, I mean, The Last Jedi wasn't going to come out for another year. So this script is an incredibly well done follow-up to what happened in Last Jedi. And people have talked about whether or not, Colin Trevorrow did not want Luke to die. But based on this, he knew Luke was going to die. And the idea that Luke was both haunting, I say haunting, but it's not like he was going, woo, he was trying to pull Ben back from the dark side. And he knew. So I think that the loss of Carrie Fisher probably threw all of their plans into a tizzy, thinking, oh my God, what are we going to do? And I'll bet it put them on a path, because as I reported yesterday, well, I didn't report this, I was just bringing it up, reminding everybody that Colin Trevorrow left. He either left on his own accord over creative differences or whatever, left before Last Jedi even came out. So what I find sad is I see a lot of this, why it didn't happen, to answer your question. And again, I am speculating. I have no ties to anybody making Star Wars movies. Now, I don't know for a fact, but I find it interesting that I think that's what happened with Carrie Fisher, was probably something that no one recovered from. And I think that, again, I'm sure after this script, I would bet that Colin Trevorrow and Derek Connolly went and did draft after draft after draft, and I'll bet a lot of it had to do with they didn't know what to do in the wake of Princess Leia no longer being able to be in the script. So I'm sure that had a lot to do with it. But I don't know. Again, I have no idea. I do know that I really like this script. So Nick also said, also, I'm glad you brought this topic up. You're referring, I was originally going to do, obviously, I was going to talk about the demise of physical media, which I will talk about tomorrow. But I figured I've received such a deluge of of DMs and emails and tweets and things. People wanted me to talk about the script more because I didn't talk about it enough. And now I'm sure it must be out by now. I mean, look, the great thing is I'm sure that somebody might have it, and we'll post it on Reddit because it'll be dissected and there's going to be many people with opinions, and that'll be interesting. But Nick says, I'm glad you brought this topic up. I am getting an Amazon package today of Mad Max Fury Road, Big Trouble in Little China, The Fly 86, Crawl. By the way, the Crawl 4K disc is a great disc. Not only is the movie great, but it has great special features. So I highly recommend that. The Alien Anthology, which is great. My boy Charlie de Lazarica did the amazing documentaries. And by the way, if you've never seen it before, since you're getting the Alien Anthology, I highly recommend the assembly cut. I don't know what it's called. It's not really a director's cut, but the long version, the alternate version of Alien 3 that Charlie and his compatriots who did the Alien Anthology had a hand in assembling. I mean, it's not perfect, but that version of Alien 3 is very, very cool, and it's great to have, so check that out. And Invasion of the Body Snatchers 1978, all on Blu-ray. Well, as everybody knows, I am a huge fan of Philip Kaufman's Invasion of the Body Snatchers 1978, his remake. I think it should be spoken of in the same breath as you talk about John Carpenter's The Thing, or you talk about David Cronenberg's remake of The Fly, or even Chuck Russell's remake of The Blob. They are incredible. The Invasion of the Body Snatchers 78 has barely aged. It's an incredible film about paranoia, and what I love about that movie is it's a movie where the invasion has happened. The main characters just don't know it yet. And I always thought that was a really interesting way to do things. I think that's fantastic. Willow sent in a tip. She says, what did you imagine Jar Jar to be like when you first read the Phantom Menace script? Did you picture him as being a more serious character? That's a very good question. I was explaining yesterday that I had acquired a copy of the Phantom Menace script. And by the way, the copy of the Phantom Menace script I had acquired was about I want to say 6 months maybe before the movie came out. And the person who gave it to me told me to go get my my Star Wars soundtracks out and turn on the music as I read the script, and I did. And I really, really liked the Phantom Menace script. I really liked it. And I liked it because I thought it was a pretty strong script. Now, I know everyone's going, well, if you think it was a strong script, maybe we shouldn't believe you or accept your taste. How good can your taste be? But here's the thing. It was the tone of, when I read it, I was reading it as if it was like Star Wars, where the character of Jar Jar Binks, I didn't read him like, please, Misa, blah, blah, blah. I wasn't reading it like that. I was reading him as like a serious alien. And like maybe, if anything, he would be like sort of a sage-like Rastafarian, maybe. But I certainly he didn't seem like a cartoon character the way it was written. And, I thought that directorially it would have been, I think, a lot more. The choice to shoot the Phantom Menace on sets and against green screen, I think, really hurt it. And the film is very stilted, and the direction was problematic. So I really believed that when I was reading Phantom Menace, I was going to get something along the lines of Star Wars and Empire. And it read that way. It was really interesting. So that's how I imagined Jar Jar Binks to be. I didn't imagine him. I didn't imagine not liking him, because I'd never really, as I've talked about, other than the Muppet characters, I didn't like the design of any of most of Jabba's coterie of ne'er-do-wells that worked for him. Cy Snoodles with the mouth in the front. I know George Lucas went in that direction, but the aliens in Star Wars up to that point, up to like in Star Wars and Empire, all of the aliens, whether they're in the cantina, you believe them. As I love to say, as the Viceroy of Verisimilitude, I believed in those alien creatures. And when I got to Return of the Jedi, as I've explained, I liked Bib Fortuna a great deal. But the Gamorrean Guard, when you first see it, it just looks, the design was too animated. When I say animated, it looked like it looked like it was designed for an animated film. And especially like Ben Quadneros or any of the other pod racers, Sebulba, none of that looked real to me. I did not believe, I know this is strange, but I'm always talking about verisimilitude. I did not believe that those creature designs could exist in the Star Wars universe as we had seen them. And it started out with Jedi. I mean, I know those are George Lucas's, those are the things he wants, but it's hard for me. Even the color of Max Rebo, the entire Rebo band. I'm like, wait, what? I like Jabba the Hutt. I even liked, and I liked Bib Fortuna, but the other aliens were too, like, out of something else. And I really felt that Phantom Menace, when I finally saw it, so much of the way it was done, it felt like I was watching an animated film that was directed more towards young people. But the script did not read that way. I swear to God, it didn't read that way. It was really, I really blame a lot of my problems, all of my problems in terms of the Phantom Menace with the execution. Because the idea that there was the Darth, and I thought the Palpatine Sidious reveal wasn't that obvious. It was like, wait a minute, what's up? Anonymous sent in a tip and says, hey, Rob, what time are the Seahawks playing next week? Thanks a lot for that. It's too soon. It's too soon. It's still an open wound, but I grant you that is amusing. So thank you for that. Stubble McShave sent in a tip, said, hey, Rob and the rest of the Post-Geek Singularity. I just wanted to mention that tomorrow is the 30th anniversary of the first book of The Wheel of Time being released. I know that Amazon have done interviews with some central people, and there may be something on that tomorrow. Okay, I've received, there's been like 1,000 new subscribers to this channel. And one of the things you have to understand is there are a lot of regulars, and what makes this channel and the Post-Geek Singularity, this community, and all of you imagination connoisseurs, what makes this channel so much fun is all of the regulars and all the people that have been here for a while sharing their love of various things. And Stubble McShave, our man in Sweden, loves Robert Jordan's Wheel of Time series. Of course, they're making a television series out of the book series now. And when Stubble McShave ever brings up the Wheel of Time, I just get a warm feeling in my heart, because the way I love Star Trek, Stubble McShave loves the Wheel of Time. So, of course, tomorrow is the 30th anniversary of the Wheel of Time. I didn't know that, but Stubble, I want to know, how are you going to celebrate? Are we going to see you like going through your collection and reading segments of each one? I want to know. Send me another video, man. By the way, if anybody wants to send me videos, you can go to the Burnettwork.net website. Send me videos. I will play videos from anybody. If you want to show me, if you want to just say hello, if you want to ask a question, if you want to do anything, send me videos. You don't have to. Everyone knows I read letters every day, and I'll get to those soon. But the Burnettwork.net is where you can communicate with me, and obviously I read letters for people, again, who haven't been here. The Richard is here. The Richard says, Palp was like out of Hellraiser. Any other body horror tormented souls from any other films that you appreciate? Oh, I'm a huge fan of, look, for anybody who knows me, I love my Cronenberg body horror. I love anything to do. All of Cronenberg's early movies, they came from within. Rabid, The Brood, Videodrome. I mean, all the way up to Crash and Dead Ringers. So, and of course, The Fly. And talk about an unmade script. I wish I could find it. It's in here somewhere. One of my favorite unmade scripts, as an aside, the Richard, would have been, I think, the ultimate body horror script. And if anybody could find it, by the way, if you can find it out there, I even asked David Cronenberg himself about this, and he was somewhat dismayed that I had a copy. But he wrote a feature-length script called Crimes of the Future. It wasn't really based on his original short film Crimes of the Future that he made as a student, but it was an incredible script that sort of was a culmination of all of Cronenberg's body horror works. It's one of my favorite unproduced scripts. I don't know if he would ever make it now. It's a bonkers script. I'm sure anybody reading it would be like, what the hell is this? But maybe if somebody could dig it out, because some agency has it somewhere. But it would be great to see if you gave it to like Kylie Marsh, who started the Blacklist, or pardon me, the Bloodlist, not the Blacklist. If you could get it to Kaylee, maybe she could promote it. Or maybe Cronenberg's son, who made Antiviral, a movie that if you haven't seen it, it's another one of my favorite weird body horror movies. Check that out. But yeah, I got to go back to Cronenberg, the Richard. Those are all, David Cronenberg's one of my favorite directors, and I love his body horror movies. Zachary King sent a super chat and says, Rob, who would be your pick to play James Bond next? Well, I'd love to see Henry Cavill play James Bond. But, our man Rob Stark from the North, who was in Bodyguard, I think Richard there, our man Richard, he could do a good job. Although, I've heard that Barbara Broccoli had his eye on him. If you guys haven't seen Bodyguard, BBC's Bodyguard, it's on Netflix. Check it out. It's some good stuff. Zachary King goes on. He says, Rob, if we could take a break from the Star Wars, Star Trek, and James Bond franchises for a minute, what's your overall opinion of the Alien franchise and the direction it's taken? What a great question that is. Okay, first of all, as many people know, I think Alien is for what Star Wars did for space fantasy, Alien did for science fiction horror. I can't tell you what it was like to see Alien in the theater. I can, but unless you were there, I was 12 when I first saw Alien, and after it had come out, and it was so transcendent. There was nothing. I've often talked about on this show how being a fan of science fiction, fantasy, and horror, being an imagination connoisseur, and living in the time we live, and being a child of the 70s and 80s, one of the great joys of my own life, which really shaped me, was seeing these things for the first time. And I can't tell you, now everyone knows, hell, kids love the Alien. But seeing Alien for the very first time, nothing ever like that existed before. People talk about how, sure, Alien was influenced by It, The Terror from Beyond Space, or Mario Bava's Planet of the Vampires, which is true. And by the way, if you haven't seen Planet of the Vampires, I love Planet of the Vampires. Yeah, it's from the 60s, but it's awesome. And it's directed by Mario Bava, so what's not to love? But when Alien came out, you talk about verisimilitude. That movie just dripped with it. The great thing about Alien was, again, like Star Wars, which is about a farmer and a truck driver and a veteran of foreign wars, blue-collar people, so is Alien. Alien made the characters, the crew of the Nostromo, totally, they're just workaday folks, and they're on this giant sort of damp, dirty oil refinery in space, and you totally bought into it. And the verisimilitude, the reality they created, the set design, everything, you totally believed it. And then, of course, when you land on LV-426 and you find the alien derelict and all of that, you'd never seen anything like that. And the mood and the tone, loved it. Loved Alien. It's so great. You see, if Alien plays, I don't know now, they have vaulted all these great Fox titles, but because Disney owns them. If you get a chance to see Alien, you haven't seen Alien unless you've seen it on a big TV with a big sound system, because at the end of the film, once the self-destruct of the Nostromo has been set, the flickering lights and everything, the feel of that movie is incredible. So I love Alien. I loved James Cameron's Aliens. Who doesn't love Aliens? Again, a different movie. It didn't have the verisimilitude of the first, but it still is pretty great. I say that because obviously Aliens was made for, believe it or not a whole lot of money. And the story is that I think Gail Ann Hurd, who was married to Cameron at the time, and also, people talk about women in Hollywood. Gail Ann Hurd, I had the opportunity to interview her once a long time ago. Gail Ann Hurd is one of the smartest, not just women, but people in Hollywood that I ever met. And she produced Aliens, and they only had 6 alien suits because that's all they could afford. Aliens to me is one of the great examples of how to make a fantastic science fiction and fantasy film on a limited budget. And now with CG, you can do anything, but Alien stands head and shoulders as one of the great achievements of science. It was still a very healthily budgeted movie, but we're talking along the lines, I think Alien was 10 million or 11 million or something. Aliens was less than 20. much bigger. The scope was there. It was amazing. And the 70s was and the 80s was a great time of fantasy filmmaking when you had filmmakers that really knew how to stretch their budgets. Look no further than Dawn of the Dead, Romero's Dawn of the Dead, and look at how epic that film is. But I think the Alien franchise, unfortunately, has really lost its way, especially with, I hate to say it because I love Ridley Scott, the Alien franchise. The whole thing about what I loved about Alien is when you meet the space jockey in the alien derelict and you see all the eggs that are there, they're unknowable. We as human beings know that the cosmos, there are things in the cosmos we're just never going to know the answers to. And the name alien, truly, the xenomorph was alien. It was the greatest alien creature I think that was ever seen. I don't think it's ever been surpassed. Some people might say the Thing, but I disagree. I think the alien is seen, the big chap as they called it, is the greatest alien ever put on screen. And I think, unfortunately, with Prometheus and Alien Covenant, they have demystified that. I hate the idea that the xenomorph is actually the creation of some crazy robot, crazy android from Earth. And I really think that the Alien franchise sort of went off the rails. Although I would like to see Ridley Scott see where he's going to go, but unfortunately, boy, what a bummer. But anyway, I hope that answers the question, Zachary. I think Alien and Aliens are two of the finest science fiction films ever made, and Alien stands as the greatest example of gothic horror in space. It does not get any better. I can't see it ever being surpassed. Maybe one day it will. I mean, we've seen everything from Event Horizon, which I think is a much better movie than people give it credit for, but unfortunately. Geeky Candy I met last night. Very impressive young woman, and I look forward to conversing with her further. Geeky Candy says, I still believe that on paper, this script had so much more potential than what was presented on screen. Thank you for sharing. I plan to read it to my son if it ever comes out. I hope so. That would be interesting. I do think, unfortunately, as I've said, I am not is 5 for 5 for me in terms of strikeouts when it comes to his science fiction films. And as somebody who surrounds himself, I mean, as you can see, one of the great joys in my life has been reading. And science fiction is a very literary genre. And I've literally thousands of books. I'm constantly reading. And I think in order to be a great filmmaker, especially if you're going to work in the science fiction genre, and that means if you're going to write for Star Trek, if you're going to write for Star Wars, or Alien, or any of these great franchises, you have to be well-versed in literature, because science fiction is all about the concepts behind it. And I think, unfortunately, J.J. Abrams, especially with Star Trek, really, in his desire to make Star Trek more appealing to other people, really dumbed it down. And I think as a filmmaker, he becomes enamored of images, production art, and he's like, let's show that. Like, look, the idea of the Death Star ravaged in the ocean is a great idea. I love that idea. The visuals, I mean, I loved the battle with the crashing waves and the Death Star, but it doesn't make any sense. And while it's a great visual, the Emperor coming back was never explained. And it's not somebody was going back and forth on my on the chat from yesterday's, or on the comments from yesterday's chat. We were going back and forth, and yes, I do look at the comments that Palpatine had to come back. It's like, no. There's the problem is, if you watch the Star Wars films, when you jump between Return of the Jedi and the Rise of Return of the Jedi and Force Awakens, it's like, wait a minute, what? The last time we saw our characters, they won a great victory, and then you jump in, and it's like, well, how do we get here? And it's unfortunate. I get it. It was a result of Disney purchasing the Star Wars, purchasing Lucasfilm, and they needed to start fresh. I get all of that. But I also think it stands as a great example. And look, no corporation is ever going to say our movie made $2 billion. It was not a failure. But I think ultimately, you got to play the long game in terms of this franchise. They've invested another $1 billion in Galaxy's Edge. The Mandalorian is there. You need to take the time. You have to make sure that you have, first of all, people that really understand this stuff. They really understand what makes Star Wars great, because as I've said before, remember, in 1977, there were no Star Wars fans because it didn't exist. Star Wars made its fandom out of nothing, out of the ether. It created fandom. It created Star Wars fandom by its very essence, by being what it was. And it's not about I don't think Star Wars, look, I love Star Destroyers and X-Wings and TIE Fighters, and I love Grand Moff Tarkin, and I love Queen Amidala. I do actually love Queen Amidala. I hope they make a Hot Toys figure of her. I like a lot of Star Wars. I've said the prequels are bad movies, but good Star Wars, if that makes sense. I think you need to get back to the very essence of what goes on, and what goes on, what people do not understand. The Burnett axiom is, never put your universe before your characters and your story. And when it comes to Star Wars, your universe grows out of your characters and your story. That's always true of everything. But, you know, in Star Wars, you go and you look at it, you hear about the Clone Wars and the Jedi, and you learn about these things as you move along. But the story, the narrative of the original Star Wars, the narrative thrust, you never leave those plans. It's very simple. The princess has to get the plans to the rebellion to maybe destroy the Death Star, and you follow that narrative. You never stray from that narrative. And I think one of the things I liked about this Colin Trevorrow script is it's very concise, it's very tight, the characterizations are good, you still get your mythology. And I'm not saying the script is perfect, because I have notes. But anyway. But yes, I think if it's something tells me, I've heard it's out. People have told me they have this script. It's only a matter of time before it's all over the internet. But I want it to be said right now. I did not leak this script. I have not sent a script to anyone. I don't even think I've seen a script, actually, to be honest. Or have I? But I would not give it to anybody if I had it, because it's not mine to give. I can't help it if it just shows up. Mark C. sent in a super chat and said, if Ryan had killed Leia but Luke left alive, could the script still have worked if Jedi Master Luke took over the Resistance? That's interesting. Probably. I think it probably could have. But as I will get into, let me go a little further. Destiny Captain sent, a very generous super chat. Thank you very much, Destiny Captain. I think it's logical to surmise that there was a plea to remove the death of Luke from The Last Jedi to allow a path forward, and someone somewhere in a position of power said no. Well, I don't know, because I have to tell you, I loved how Luke was used in Trevorrow's draft of this script, the Connolly Trevorrow draft. I loved it. I love the idea that Luke, as a Force ghost, is going after Ben and trying to bring him back, because he's still a teacher. He's teaching Ben, he's teaching Rey at the same time, even though he's not there. And it's really interesting, and I'm going to read more, or I'll go over more of the script. But again, I don't know. And of course, Disney okayed Luke dying. They were okay with Rian Johnson's script and everything that happened. And to be honest, I was too. I just think, again, we needed to get there. A lot of what we should have seen, what I thought should have happened, there should have been you should have had why that they didn't do this. The Force Awakens should have all been about Luke, Han, Leia, R2-3PO, Chewbacca all together. And the scene of Luke being tempted or whatever and trying to take Kylo Ren's life, we should have seen all that. And that should have been, all of that should have all been in the first movie. And then we should have seen Luke leave. And we could have had a big adventure. You could have seen the galaxy at the height of its power. And then all because of Luke being tempted or seeing that's when the everything went to hell. And I think it could have been interesting. Mukbang Reviews sent in a very generous super chat. Thank you. You're always so nice to the channel. Invasion 1978, Invasion of the Body Snatchers, should be spoken about amongst the very best films of all time, not just horror or science fiction. Leonard Nimoy did decent work, but here was Spock 2. Here was Spock to us all. All of the acting, all of the dread. Need we say more? No, Mukbang, for those of you who haven't seen Philip Kaufman's 1978 Invasion of the Body Snatchers, it's so good. And I mean, it's an adult horror film. I mean, it's not like the pacing is obviously different, but the paranoia, it's truly terrifying. And it really is a wonderful, wonderful film. So you need to check it out if you haven't already. Brandon Valenzuela sends in a super chat. Well, guess what? James Cameron and Neil Blomkamp are doing Alien 5. You heard it here first. Are they? I mean, that would be cool. I haven't heard that, but I will take your word for that. I think that would be pretty cool if they in fact do that. I think I would like to see that. You know, I think that'd be very, very neat. Mark Chure sent in a super chat and says, Luke's force projection from The Last Jedi was kept, but he didn't die. He could still have haunted Kylo Ren. He could have. I think that could definitely be a good thing. Absolutely. Yeah. Well, ladies and gentlemen, you know I've got a lot of letters to read. I've got tons of letters, as a matter of fact. And let's see. I don't know whose I should read first. I'm going to read this one first. And since Star Trek Picard had its world premiere yesterday, this comes from Aaron Johnson. Dear Rob, I thought I would bring up a Star Trek movie that I really enjoy. I bring this up because you were making me laugh and smile very happily with your comments involving Star Trek Picard, and I commend you for that. My favorite Next Generation Star Trek movie in honor of Star Trek Picard is Star Trek First Contact. The film is terrific. The music is nice to hear. You know what? I agree that it's got one of Jerry Goldsmith's great themes when the Phoenix blasts off. I love the main theme of Star Trek First Contact, which is played throughout the movie in various forms. By definition, Jerry Goldsmith's score throughout the movie is wonderful. The music that is non-Goldsmith based and is performed by rock bands include Obi Dobi, I Know, or Ooby Dooby by Roy Orbison, and my favorite, Magic Carpet Ride by Steppenwolf, which I think was the same exact song used in the Columbia Pictures film Go, but done in a manner that Star Trek First Contact could have also benefited from, which is a remix version done beautifully by Philip Steyer and the Crystal Method. I like the Crystal Method. Star Trek First Contact, the film, is a great movie. I like the movie throughout. What I'm fond of the most is James Cromwell's performance as Zephram Cochrane. He pulls off Cochrane very well. Alfre Woodard is great as Lily, though what bothered me was when she was in the film, how she acted toward Captain Picard, and this goes back to your comments about Star Trek Picard. Is the type of character like Woodward's Lily who needs to be put in the brig for being disrespectful to Picard? When someone asks for your help, you talk to them nicely. Now, if someone were to rework Star Trek First Contact, Woodward's character Lily would be a much calmer person as a mom and would even have a daughter with her. The Borg Queen, played by Alex Kriya, is decent, although I think what could have helped the film would have been a feature film appearance of Star Trek Voyager 7 of 9 as a protector to help stop the Borg Queen. Well, actually, 7 of 9, if memory serves, did not exist at the time. Star Trek First Contact came out, I think, in 96, and 7 of 9 did not. That would have been the second season of Star Trek Voyager. 7 of 9 didn't exist. To help as a protector to help stop the Borg Queen. The rest of the film is fun. I will leave a question for you, Rob. Do you think Star Trek First Contact should have been carefully changed so that it had a better, fun ending? Aaron J. Well, first of all, I think one of the best parts of First Contact is, in fact, the ending, when the Vulcans arrive and we see First Contact Day. I have to tell you, when I first saw First Contact, I didn't like it. I didn't like it. I was disappointed because I felt that in Star Trek The Next Generation, between Best of Both Worlds Part 1 and 2, and then, of course, I, Borg, and then, of course, well, Descent Part 1 and 2 were not not great. I understand what they were trying to do, and I think in context, if you go back and you look, they've aged better than they originally were. But I thought that First Contact was really goofy to me. The time travel plot, the introduction of the Borg Queen, I know why they had to do it. But one of the things that I thought was so scary about the Borg when they were introduced in the second season of Next Generation in the episode Q Who was that there was no reasoning with them. There was no central figure. Like the Borg to me seemed to be somebody made a horrible mistake, whether it was biological experiments or transhumanism or something, that it just ran amok. And the unlike Skynet destroying mankind, what if an AI system or even just an automated system, something happened, the Borg were created, there's nothing you can do. They're more like a force of nature. So when they roll over you and assimilate you, there's nothing you can do. There's nobody you can reason with. And while somebody would say to me, well, Rob, what about the Borg creating Locutus in Best of Both Worlds 1 so they could easily deal with and talk to humanity or the Federation when they're going to assimilate them? Well, that's true. Having a spokesperson was sort of interesting, which then presupposes some kind of a hive mind, some kind of an intelligence behind the Borg, which is interesting. But I thought that the Borg Queen was a little bit, your vampire queen. It was a little too, it demystified the Borg. And this is when I think when you go back to science fiction, you can find a lot of really interesting concepts in a lot of the hardcore sci-fi that you read today. And I was just overall, I was disappointed in the idea. And I thought they didn't really bring anything new to the idea of the Borg. They were the same Borg as always, but it was nice to see. I mean, the movie was a lot of fun. It's an action movie. I did like the battle outside the Enterprise on the navigational deflector, and I liked all that. And I liked all of there's a lot of great character moments. So I guess, I've come to like First Contact, but when I first saw it, I wasn't that big of a fan, unfortunately. Now, here's another letter from Calvin Bowles, who obviously, if you've watched the channel, he sent a video of his son, his 4-year-old son, who is already a science fiction and Star Trek fan, a very big Star Trek fan at 4 years of age. So Calvin says, and by the way, Calvin says, "Hi, Rob, love your show. I'm writing this letter in response to what is wrong with Star Trek. You talked about the utopian society in Star Trek and mentioned the so-called dicks at that time. I would submit they wanted the same things the good people wanted. I will now show you how what they were trying to do is no different than what the people of the 23rd century wanted. Let's start with Nils Barris in Trouble with Tribbles. Did he misuse his distress call? Did he make Kirk divert his ship on false pretenses? But why? He did not want the people of Sherman's planet to starve. Let's look at Decker and the Doomsday Machine. He took over the Enterprise and put everyone in danger. But why did he do this? Because there was a planet killer endangering billions of lives. Now look at the most controversial. John Gill in the episode Patterns of Force. The planet was in chaos and he wanted to unite it using the Nazi Party. He even felt he could help the people by using the pride and unity part of what National Socialism stood for. By itself, that would have been a good thing. He thought he could avoid the genocide part of it. You see, during the episode, he had no part in that. My point is, all of the people of Earth subscribed to the utopian principles of the 23rd century. Some were just misguided by how they applied it. I think in modern Trek, they missed this key point. Now these characters would all be seen as bad guys. Barris would be seen as a power-hungry diplomat. Decker would be shown as a man who lost his ship and would get one back at any cost. And John Gill would be shown as an evil white supremacist. None of these men were that simple. These characters were more complex than that. In fact, in actuality, they were trying to achieve the same goals as all mankind of the 23rd century. Well, Calvin, great letter. Thank you. As many people know, I have often said that Star Trek does not, all of the best, I call them, Star Trek is not a show that had villains. Star Trek is a show that had antagonists. And I think, Calvin, you summed it up correctly. The people, and all people would say all the best villains do this, but the people in Star Trek, there were very few mustache twirling villains in the original series. People always had reasons. John Gill was a tragic character who decided for the people of Echos, where he believed that planet had arrested development, and it was a stagnant society, that he would apply the basic principles of National Socialism because a beaten and demoralized Germany, paying war reparations after World War I, they were able to use National Socialism and in turn create one of the greatest war machines the world has ever seen in a very short period of time. Unfortunately, John Gill made the mistake of realizing that National Socialism took hold only after there was a scapegoated member of their population. In the case of Germany, it was the Jews and the Jews of Europe. And of course, for the Ecosians, it was their neighboring planet of Zeon. I know, I understand, not exactly subtle, but still, it worked. And I think that's what John Gill was, a tragic character. He was, of course, that was a really stupid thing to do. And Matt Decker was driven mad with grief. He was, like you said, Matt Decker wasn't a villain. And Kirk knew that. Kirk knew that the grief had consumed him because Kirk understood that if he had lost his ship and his crew, he would have felt the same way. And I think that those nuanced characters, and I was talking about how Kor, the first Klingon we ever met in Errand of Mercy during Star Trek's first season, was not a villain. And you saw that Kirk and him, Kor is played by John Colicos, they had a mutual respect. They liked each other, even though they were on opposite sides. And at the end, when the Organians step in and stop them from tearing each other apart in the skies above Organia, when they stop the war, that Kirk and Kor both have a moment. They both wanted to fight a war. They both wanted to get into it. And it's a great moment when Kor says at the end, it would have been glorious. One of the great moments in Star Trek history, I think. But a great letter, Calvin. I really appreciate you writing in. So thank you for that. Much appreciated. Well, let's get back to the Duel of Fates script. Colin Trevorrow and his writing partner, Derek Connolly's Duel of the Fates script. Now, one of the things that I really, really liked was, and I thought really worked well, is, of course, everything that happens, the final battle takes place on the skies above, or in the skies above Coruscant and over, in the city. So again, it mirrors the end of Return of the Jedi. You have a big ground battle going on, and you have a huge aerial battle going on. One of my favorite things that's in this script is, of course, yes, indeed. Now, someone could say, how could he fit? Well, you just assume that maybe there's slightly bigger X-Wings. Chewbacca flies an X-Wing. And I'm like, come on. Who wouldn't have wanted to see that? And there are really interesting things that happen. Of course, Rose is captured and tortured a la Empire Strikes Back and is defiant, which is great. And then she manages to escape. There's a lot of great stuff. I mean, Rose, I hope Kelly Marie Tran never, I said this before, never reads this script, because it's a damn shame. J.J. Abrams and they took a lot in Rise of Skywalker from the script. The one thing they really didn't take was any of Rose Tico's part, because this script really makes her a great, great Star Wars character. And I'm very bummed out. Now, here's something sort of interesting. When Rey and Kylo Ren are at Mortis, the well of the living force, the origins of the living force in the galaxy, she's scaling an icy peak, blasted by wind and sleet. She reaches a plateau, and she finds the robed ancients. She finds statues of the robed ancients that are not Jedi. And there's snow and wind and whipping around her, and then suddenly she's having a vision, and she's back in the desert in Jakku, and she's over the dunes, and she hears a child's voice scream out, and she sees herself as young Rey being dragged away by her mother and father, and then they let her go, and they leave Rey, and you see the horror of being left behind by her parents, and then Rey's mother breaks free and runs towards her, but the father holds her back. The father says, "We can't. It's too dangerous." And then you see the mother say, "Wait here. We'll come back. You'll understand. We'll come back. Just wait." And Rey is screaming as she has this vision, and that is when Kylo Ren shows up, and it's really interesting. And then Kylo Ren doesn't show up yet, but she pulls her lightsaber out and she's screaming, why she wants to know why they didn't come back, and it's really great. And then you see the same thing. Kylo Ren is now on Mortis again. He is going through the woods. He's traipsing through Mortis as well, and he finds a house in the woods, and smoke is coming from the chimney. And the script talks about how his younger self, Ben Solo, approaches this house. He wears all black robes, a hood. This is clearly a Force-induced vision that he's having. And Kylo is watching his younger self approach this house. And his younger self opens the door, and it's Han Solo. Han Solo is there, and Han asks what he's doing. And the young Ben says, "That's not my name anymore." And Han Solo says, your mother can't see you here, not like this. And Ben says to Han, "I'm not coming back. There's a greater destiny for me." And Han says, "They're lies, son, empty promises. You have everything you need right here, right now." And Ben says, "What, you? Her? My master says I have unequaled power. Neither of you understand." And Han Solo says, "Your mother understands more than anyone." And Ben says, "She sent me away." And Han says, "To learn, to grow." And Ben says, "I have grown." Han says, "Your mother loves you." And Ben says, "She's afraid of me." And Han says, "Give me the lightsaber, son." And Han reaches for the lightsaber, and Ben says, "You know I can't." And then it cuts to Kylo killing Han Solo. That was actually the vision that he has. And it's really interesting. And then Kylo starts going up the same mountain that Rey has already been up. And it's really interesting. I mean, all this stuff is very, very interesting. And again, there's just more character. It wasn't like, okay, let's just stand here and let's have a vision of Han Solo and he'll try and help you. No, it was in this quest. They're going up, literally, Rey and Kylo are going to the source of the living force in the galaxy on Mortis. And I liked this idea. And yes, there's nobody there. Palpatine is not there. And but I don't think that matters. And it's very interesting. And then, of course, there's all kinds of craziness. The battle over Coruscant in the skies and in the streets is an amazing battle. But what we really want to know is how this movie ends, and how is the Rey-Kylo Ren confrontation. And we go back to they're at the Temple of Mortis, and Kylo finally confronts Rey at the top of this mountain. There's a huge temple, the Temple of Mortis, and they meet. And he goes in, and you see Kylo Ren with his Beskar helmet, the visage of his damaged face. And Kylo says, "The Force is strong in this place. Can you feel it?" And Rey says, "You're in pain beneath that mask." And Kylo says, "Get out of my head. You won't like what you find." And they start using their Force powers against each other. He says, "I'm stronger than Anakin Skywalker, stronger than his son. But you're still afraid," says Rey. "Of what? You? Of what you've become. The dark side has left you empty, a husk." "I don't have to be alone," says Kylo. "With the power of this place, we could rule the galaxy as the ancients did, the dark side and the light." And Rey says, "You still think I'd join you after what you did to my family?" And that sets Kylo back. "Were you going to tell me here, weaken me with the truth? I know what you did. Deep down, I've always known." And then this is the most interesting part. Rey says, "My parents didn't sell me for drinking money. They were hiding from you." Kylo says, "So you remember." And there's a flash to the Knights of Ren in the rain, and the image from Rey's Force vision when she first touched the lightsaber. And a distant child screams. Kylo says, "Snoke made his orders clear. Find anyone who could destroy him. It didn't take us long to find you." Rey finds out the truth. The Knights of Ren and Kylo killed Rey's parents. And Kylo says, "You blame me for your life on Jakku. You should thank me for it. You were safe." Rey says, "Say it, did you kill them?" And then Kylo says, "Yes, I did." And then Rey says, "You murdered Han Solo." Kylo says, "I'm not here for you, Rey. Rey says, you murdered millions of people. Kylo says, all I want is behind that door. And Rey says, you'll have to kill me. And Kylo says, I know. And they start this massive knockdown, drag-out fight. And eventually what ends up happening between them is there is an epic battle. And what Kylo learns is they literally start trying to take the living force out of each other. And you can see a lot of these ideas were reworked into the Rise of Skywalker. And it's really interesting. I mean, I really like the fact that it really came down to the two of them. I know the dynamic with Return of the Jedi when you had the Emperor Palpatine, and I'm sure that's where part of the idea, again, is let's bring Palpatine in. When you're looking at this and you're trying to make it better or something, I get where the idea is you need a catalyst. But I think that the two of them, it was all more about emotion and who they are as people, the loneliness they feel inside. And I really like that it was the two of them confronting one another at this temple, the source of the living force in the galaxy. And there's something, I'm going to cut to something because I wanted to talk about this because it's really funny. I talked about this last night on Midnight's Edge. There's a moment in this script that I thought was hilarious where during the Battle of Coruscant, it says that R2-D2 and C-3PO are walking through lasers. And they see a First Order astromech droid, an R8-08 droid, finds a flipped tank and plugs into this flipped tank. And the droid is sending a distress signal. And C-3PO says, he's sending a distress signal. Stop him. And no one's listening to C-3PO. R2's just beeping furiously. And C-3PO says, me? I'm not programmed for violence, R2. And then R2's like, beep, 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 do something. And C-3PO puts himself and literally runs through laser fire, runs to this First Order astromech droid, and rips the back panel of it off. And C-3PO says, I do apologize for this. And he reaches into the droid's innards and starts ripping the innards out of this droid. He literally C-3PO straight up murders a droid. And then he's saying R2's beeping, and then C-3PO is even more horrified, and he realizes what he's doing. He's telling the droid, he's like, please go quietly, and then he gives one last yank, and then C-3PO is there, and Finn comes running by, and C-3PO is fretting over the inanimate shell of the R8-08 and says, I've done horrible things. I may never be the same. And it's just funny. I mean, there's these great C-3PO moments that I really love. And then we go back to the Temple of Mortis, and Kylo says, I could have been your teacher. I could have ended your pain. And they're just battling each other. And Kylo strikes a blow across her face, and leaving a scar from her cheek to her forehead. Rey drops the lightsaber to the stone. She falls to her knees and screams, clutching her eyes. She's been blinded. Kylo Ren blinds Rey in this battle. And Rey is crying blood, and she falls back down the stairs, and you think that this is it for Rey. And then Kylo goes into the Temple of Mortis. And it's really amazing. And when he goes into the Temple of Mortis, and again we cut back to the Battle of Coruscant, and it's amazing. And the battle is amazing. The epic battle. Everybody going from the square, going from the First Order Citadel, the headquarters, to space and back, and it's just great. I mean, the whole battle is really cool. It's really epic. And then R2-D2 gets blown up, gone. And R2-D2's head is scorched, emotion like we've never seen from C-3PO. Finn is speechless. He's crushed by it all. And then Chewbacca takes R2's scorched shell onto his back, again, repeating what Chewbacca did in Bespin when Chewbacca found wrecked C-3PO, does the same thing with R2. And everybody's upset, of course. But then here's where the great stuff happens. So we come back to the Temple of Mortis, and Kylo Ren goes into the temple. He goes where the statues of ancients are looking down upon him in the void, and he finds this stone slab where I guess their version of the Ark of the Covenant. He gets into this temple, he opens it up, and he opens up, I guess, presumably what is the Ark of the Covenant that's in this temple, and there's nothing in there. Kylo searches the rune-covered walls for answers. He finds only arcane sculpted faces. He fires his saber and slashes at the statues. And when there's nothing there, that's when Force Ghost Luke shows up and says, "You've lost, Ben." And Luke confronts Kylo Ren. After you think Rey's dead, and Luke says that Darth Vader was weak, and Luke says his love for his family saved them. "I wish it could save you." Kylo says, I did what I had to do. And then Luke says, "You are no Skywalker." And then what's really interesting is Rey senses Luke. And what's really, really cool is as Kylo is confronting Luke, Luke says, "You can't defeat us. I'm not alone. Obi-Wan is right." And just a devastated Rey, she tears off some fabric and blindfolds herself, making herself like Luke at the end of A New Hope. She is blind, but she's closed her eyes off, and it's pretty neat. And then what you see is a cut to all across everything that's going on, a la Sam Gamgee's speech at the end of The Two Towers, talking about the battle and what it means when he's at the stone window. And Luke gives a speech, and he says, "The Force surrounds us. It penetrates us. It binds the galaxy together." And you're cutting to all of the different points in the battle. And what's been going on, Luke has been able to project it to Poe, who's flying the Millennium Falcon. And it's really, really interesting stuff. And it really, really works well. And it's great. It's epic. And Luke says, "We are bound by the Force. We are one. And we will not be broken." And then that's what gets Rey to stand up and battle Kylo for the. It's great. She gets up there and she says, and Luke vanishes, by the way. And Rey says, "Our masters were wrong. I will not deny my anger, and I will not reject my love. I am the darkness, and I am the light." Kylo says, "You're nothing. You are no one." And this is, I think, a great moment. I reported on yesterday when Rey said to Poe, "Look, I'm no one." Rey says, "I'm nobody. I'm no one." And it was Poe who said to Rey, "No one is no one," meaning like everybody is somebody. And so when Kylo says, screaming, "You are nothing. You are no one," Rey ignites her blades and she says, "No one is no one," meaning everyone is somebody. And it's great. And they start their final epic battle, Kylo and Rey, and it's great. It's really great. There's another cool bit where Hux, by the way, has been trying to use the Force throughout this whole movie. And when he realizes that the Battle of Coruscant is lost, you find out he's been collecting lightsabers and that he's a secret wannabe Jedi. He's a wannabe Force user. And he commits seppuku. When the battle is lost, Hux kills himself using a purple-bladed lightsaber, which is kind of cool. And I like that. I thought that was great. And as the last battle is going on with Kylo and Rey, it says Kylo counters Rey's every move. They're evenly matched, two sides of a coin, flame and shadow, fighting to the death. A vicious swing, and Kylo's lightsaber shatters at the hilt, destroyed, along with several fingers on his hand. He looks at it with disbelief, and Rey stands over him. The anger is flowing. She separates her dual lightsabers. She holds one blade pointed to her chest. Kylo is stunned by a powerful being before him. That's being Rey. She's glowing, unfathomable, living force within her. Kylo clenches his teeth, his eyes furious, a rage like we haven't seen since Anakin. He reaches out the open palm of his good hand, and Kylo begins to extract, a la vampire again, the living force from Rey, as Tor Valum taught him. And she rises, and Kylo begins to extract all of the life force from Rey. And she pulls her blindfold off, and she's screaming, and Kylo stands tall. He's energized, and as the force energy is flowing through him, the metal comes off of his face. and his face is healed now. He's no longer damaged. The Sith energy is the damage it causes going away, and he's looking beyond to the Temple of Mortis, and Kylo says they were all wrong, all of them. The power of this place can't be taken. And Ben says, but it's nothing compared to you. And Rey is almost dead. She's almost gone. And Rey is saying, Ben, please, a la Luke in Jedi. And during this time, when he's about to kill Rey, suddenly Leia feels this disturbance in the Force, and Leia starts talking to her, talking to Ben. Ben, come home, come be with us. And she's speaking through the Force to Ben, please help us. And Kylo feels the very thing that destroyed Anakin, which was love, but it doesn't make him feel weak. And he looks at Rey's outstretched hand, and he takes her hand. So Kylo reaches down, takes Rey's hand. The living Force flows back into her, and both the light and the dark swirl within Rey as Kylo is reduced to an empty shell. So Ben sacrifices his life by giving back his own life essence and allowing Rey to take it from him, sacrificing himself so she can live. And as he's in his dying breath, Kylo says that Rey's last name is Solana. Solana. And it says Rey is stunned to hear her last name, distant like a memory. Your name, Rey Solana. And Ben Solo dies. And the battle still keeps raging. So that's how that wound up. But then this is really, really interesting. Then we go back to the Temple of Mortis. And Rey is obviously wounded. She's hurt. She's lying on the stone where the apparently where the living Force comes from. And it says that there's silence, that light fills up the space around her, particles of energy floating up. She rises with the energy. She floats up with the energy. The light engulfs the frame until we reach a place beyond what we know, the astral plane. Glimmers of energy flicker like fireflies in the darkness. And suddenly, appearing before her, are Yoda, Luke Skywalker, and Obi-Wan Kenobi. Rey asks, is this death? Obi-Wan says, in this place, there's no such thing as death. Rey says, I can see. Obi-Wan says, your true self is free of suffering, free of pain. Yoda says, taught us much you have. Rey says, I've taught you. Succeeded where we have failed. Narrow was our point of view. Luke says, you chose to embrace the dark side and the light, to find the balance within. Yoda says, coexist they must, as such feelings do in all of us. And Rey says, but if I'm here with you, Yoda says, a choice you must make, to return or to remain. Luke says, here there is serenity, knowledge, peace, those lost but not forgotten. And Rey says, and there? Obi-Wan answers, there you will face a galaxy in turmoil, pain, suffering, the loss of those you love. But then Yoda chimes in and says, but living you will be, love you shall. And Rey says, thank you. The spirits fade into the cosmic force. As the light overwhelms us, Obi-Wan Kenobi's voice echoes and says, it's interesting that it's Obi-Wan Kenobi who says this, you are a Jedi, Rey Solana, but you will not be the last. And I fucking love that. Like, what's not good about that? Anyway, I thought that was pretty damn good. And then there's one last thing that I really loved about this script. And I, again, Chewie is working on, is building R2. And a repair droid, and also a repair droid is rebuilding his destroyed frame, and C-3PO is there, and Leia comes in and says, how's he coming along? C-3PO says, a quick cycle through his memory banks, and he'll be his old self again, I hope. Leia says, he'll be fine, C-3PO. And 3PO says, I can't imagine what I'd do without him. I know he's stubborn, but it's almost as if 3PO's going to cry. And Leia says, I know. Now, what's really cool is, then Leia picks up R2's intact memory drive rescued by BB-8, and she puts it into R2-D2, reminiscent of the first time we ever saw the princess with a droid, and R2 comes back to life. As his files catalog into chronological order, he projects the contents of his memory banks, and we witness their adventures over 60 years, all from the droid's perspective. Luke buying C-3PO from the Jawas, Obi-Wan giving Luke his father's lightsaber, R2 flying through the Death Star trench, Han getting his medal on Yavin, Yoda lifting the X-Wing from the swamp, Luke saluting from the plank on Jabba's barge, Han and Leia outside the bunker on Endor. Leia is taken aback by the flood of memories. It is a catharsis for her and for us. And R2, Leia says, "Thank you, R2," and beeps affectionately. And then that is the last scene with Leia and R2. Then we cut to a different planet, a planet called Modesta. And there's a ranch, very serene, and Finn is there. And there are girls and people, and its children are there. And at the end, Rey Solana arrives to train presumably a new group of Jedi. And that's how the script ends. And I thought, wow, that was pretty satisfying. So that is basically what the script had to say. And I think it was a really effective. I think it was really effective. I mean, I really enjoyed how it ended. It's all very, very similar in a way to what Rise of Skywalker was. It's just a lot smarter, and it's a lot more character driven, and it really was filled with emotion and people. And I'm curious. I mean, I honestly believe. I think is it a perfect script? Perhaps not. The Tor Vellum character probably could have been further developed, but I think it was a lot more interesting and it had a lot more going on than what we eventually got with Rise of Skywalker. But I think ultimately, if you were to ask me the question, well, why didn't this script get made? Why did Colin Trevorrow end up leaving? And of course, if you read this script, there's a lot of Rise of Skywalker in here. It's clearly, I'm actually, as I said before, quite shocked that J.J. Abrams did not share screenplay credit. A lot was rewritten, but that's what writers do. When they take over, they try and rewrite as much as they can to make it theirs. But the ideas in this script, I think, were much more interesting. While it's cool, and as I said before, while it's cool that you get to see images like the destroyed Death Star and, oh yeah, we get to see Palpatine again, I think the idea of bringing Palpatine back with no explanation torpedoes the script. Because if you go back and you watch the original Star Wars and you watch Empire Strikes Back, even though there's a lot of backstory, you never ask yourself, well, hey, wait a minute. And I think from the very beginning, the crawl, the dead speak, how? There is a question that is posed, how is this going to happen? How does any Star Wars fan accept that Palpatine came back from the dead? You saw what happened at the end of Return of the Jedi. He gets thrown down a shaft, there's a blast of energy where he was presumably consumed, and then the Death Star blows up. It's not an explosion where you see a lot of debris. I mean, it's an immolation. There's no more Death Star left. And the idea that somehow his throne room, which was on a big spire, is left intact, not so good. Not so good. And I think that was, sort of the real problem with all of it. And it's that question, if they had provided, and what's so interesting to me is anybody who's read, whether it's Dark Empire or whether it's any of the early EU books, they have talked about the Emperor cloning himself and having contingency plans and all of that. But when you get to Exegol and you see a fleet of Star Destroyers, it's like you're asking yourself the whole time, wait, what? Where do these come from? Who are the people in the Sith temple? I mean, if they needed to go in all of these MacGuffins to go to figure out their way, you had needed a dagger and a holocron and all this. How did all the other people get there? There's thousands of people at Exegol. There's presumably the people waiting for the heavy metal concert to start that are hanging out. Who are all those people? How did they get there? And if there's all those people there, why didn't you just ask around? Hey, man, you know how to get to Exegol? There's a bunch of First Order officers there. Somebody must know, right? I mean, when those questions are brought up, how are you supposed to then buy into the script? for me, I can't get past it. As the viceroy of verisimilitude, I'm asking myself, wait a minute, you can't have your cake and eat it too, because the whole time I'm sitting there, well, I'm waiting. How did Palpatine come back? How did he survive the destruction of the Death Star? How did all of these things happen? Why are these stormtrooper people on the moons of Endor? What, why? Zori Bliss. I mean, what? You know, it's interesting. I think the script ultimately was a much tighter script. It was all character. I think the Battle of Coruscant and the liberation, actually seeing the liberation, because we don't, you know, we see parties at the end of Return of the Jedi, but seeing the people on the ground really hammered home the whole idea of what Star Wars is. I mean, it's got so much great stuff. I really would have liked to have seen this script made, because remember, you might have a good script, but the execution can take a good script, and the execution is what makes it great. It's what makes it magical, that sprinkling of that fairy dust, that alchemy that makes it all work. So yeah, I don't know. It's a shame, but I really think the reason that it happened was because I think Carrie Fisher's death threw this all into a tizzy, and people wondered, what were we going to do? How are we going to do this? And you know, Colin Trevorrow maybe said, I can't. I mean, clearly, Derek Connolly and Colin Trevorrow love and know Star Wars. They do. It's very apparent on this script. The fan service that's in this script is done so in a very... What's really interesting is, to me, what's great fan service is like when Chewbacca flies an X-Wing. That's fan service because it's something you didn't know that you wanted, but when you see it, it's fucking awesome. You know, it's just one of those things where, oh my God. And to me, that's fan service. Calling back, doing things that are cyclical, that show cyclical things about the Star Wars universe, that's always interesting, and I like all of that. But it's when you give fans something they didn't know they want, even though you figured out like, oh my God, that's great, because, you know, you've seen Chewbacca pilot the Millennium Falcon, but presumably he's probably a great pilot. And when you see him wrecking shop over Coruscant, I mean, flying low over the city, I mean, come on. That shit's dope. So, yeah, I love it. I love it. And while I don't think necessarily the script, again, is it transcendent? Is it going to rock your world? No. But what's interesting to me is I'll tell you things that I really hated in Rise of Skywalker. So this chase through the desert to find a ship that's just, it's just intact after 20 years. All of that gobbledygook is the most ridiculously horrible plotting ever. I mean, what is that about? And even when they're being chased by stormtroopers, so there's 4 of them. That's it. There's 2 dudes on glorified motorcycles with 2 dudes in jetpacks. That's all. That's what you get. I'm like, that's just not good writing. That's just lackluster. It's not great storytelling, you know? And I think this script had so much more going on in it. And while perhaps at the end, maybe Tor Vellum, there could have been something interesting where you could have watched, like as a former story analyst, I think what I would have done, my big change to this script, assuming, I would, not knowing that Carrie Fisher was going to die, if I was going to add, my big note would be to make this Tor Vellum character a bigger character. And Kylo Ren needs Tor Vellum to take him to Mortis. And there would have been more of that character, because there's not a whole lot of him. And I like that relationship. And the fact that he's not a Sith. He just is. He knows the ways of the Sith, and he's more like, I saw Tor Vellum as a more like a college professor, like this ancient professor in the ways of arcane magic. He's like Merlin, but Merlin would not be a Sith or a Jedi, if that makes any sense. That's kind of how I saw it. Well, anyway, ladies and gentlemen, that is my there you have it. I've sort of given you all of my thoughts, and I didn't really get into all the action scenes. Let me just say that they're epic. And as I've said before, one of the things that happens is there is a First Order. Their citadel on Coruscant can fly. It can literally take off. And as they're trying to escape, you find out that Rose Tico reprogrammed their hyperdrive and sent them right into a planet. So the headquarters of the First Order goes to light speed and smashes into a planet. End of the First Order. It was great. Loved it. That was great. And I love the way Rose Tico was used. And again, Kelly Marie Tran, who, I mean, talk about somebody who was done dirty. In my mind, J.J. Abrams, what they did to R2-D2 in Force Awakens and this whole trilogy, R2 and 3PO were great in this script. And so was BB-8. BB-8 had his moments to shine as well, from being an undercover droid in the beginning of the movie to always being with, he's flying in Chewbacca's X-Wing. I mean, come on. And it's very sad to see what we could have had. But you know what? That's life. And I hope that, again, you know, there are people that are like, well, how do we know this script is real? All I can say is, I don't know if it's real. But I'll tell you this. I really believe that it is. I believe with all of my heart it's a real script because, one, it's a really well-written screenplay, and two, it's too good to be unreal. It's not full of fan service, and if you look what Rise of Skywalker turned into, it is this script. It absolutely is this script. Well, anyway, I am going to bring this Robservations chat number 218 to a close. I want to welcome all of the new subscribers who have found the channel. I really appreciate that. I really appreciate all the support everyone has given me. If you like these chats, please hit like. I see the subscribers coming in. Please subscribe. You can always go to the Burnettwork.net and send me letters. I read letters every day. I didn't get to many letters today, but I promise tomorrow my topic is going to be about the demise of physical media, and I will read a lot more letters. But if you go to the Burnettwork.net, you can send in your videos to me if you want your videos to be played on the show. And those are videos, you can send me greetings, you can send me videos of your favorite movie theater, you can send me videos of the city you live in, whatever you want. I love getting videos. I will play them on the show. And you can also upload your action figure collections, pictures of your tattoos, anything you want. And you can do that at theburnettwork.net. This is, of course, the Post-Geek Singularity community, and it wouldn't be the community it is without the moderators I have here, beginning with the Honorable Mayor Mike Bodden, the mayor of Riverdale, Iowa. Of course, the former Detective Jim Boyers. Well, actually, he's not the former Detective Jim Boyers. He's a former detective named Jim Boyers, who I just call Detective Jim. Yes, we have a moderator who is an actual cop, a real detective. He's here, so watch your P's and Q's. He's on to you. Then, of course, we have Greg Smith, who's now building a 1-to-1 scale snowspeeder in his house that he's going to have at the Emerald City Comic-Con. If you don't know who Greg Smith is, and why should you, go back and watch the very first episode of Robservations and meet him. He is an amazing cosplayer. He's a member of the 501st. He built a 1-to-1 scale land speeder, which is, come on. I mean, if somebody builds a 1-to-1 scale land speeder, they're like the coolest person you're ever going to meet, right? He also built an amazing Boba Fett costume. Check out the first episode of Robservations way at the bottom of my channel. Check that out. And then, of course, we have Jordy Lyons and Lewis Yu, our latest moderators. Lewis Yu's, his sister, I think it's his sister, got a little hurt. So shouts out to that. I hope she's okay, Lewis. But my moderating staff is second to none. I'm lucky. I don't know why they've chosen to throw in the towel with me, but I'm thankful every day that they have, and they make it great. And with that, I say, as I say every day, every person you meet has a story to tell you have yet to hear. All you have to do is listen. And with that, ladies and gentlemen, I bring an end to Robservations episode 318. I thank you for being here. And as always, have a better day.